Yo, what's poppin', home slices? Today I thought I'd make a video basically showing people how to build their cars for tandem drifting and for slow drifting. The first thing that I would recommend doing is going to conversion and picking out your engine. Pretty much any of these engines work. I would just avoid using the 4-rotor and this piece of shit. The KA is okay, but it only produces like 400 horsepower maxed out anyway, and that's just not really enough for what we're trying to do. So I would, you can use this engine, but you're going to find a lot more potential out of using an engine like the RB26, which is what we're going to be going with for this build. For drivetrain, you always leave it stock. You want to keep it rear-wheel drive. I would never, advise going all-wheel drive. It's just not what you want to be doing. Body kits, the Rocket Bunny kit is like entirely, if you like it, you like it, but I wouldn't recommend using it. It's a pretty ugly kit, to be honest, but whatever suits you. Tires and rims, this is pretty important. You want to leave your tire compound as stock. Now, some cars, even though they say stock compound, if you scroll right one, as it says street tire in the top right, some cars may say sport tire. If it says that, it usually has like these street tires or like grippier tires stock. And you definitely want to avoid that for slow and tandem drifting. Yeah, try and keep the compound stock. For tire widths, depending on what horsepower you're running, I definitely recommend a skinnier width, and I wouldn't go over 235s. And for this build, we're going to be using about 700 horsepower, so I definitely recommend the thicker tires, just so you're not sliding on ice. But anywhere above, 255s, if you're going up to 275s, unless you're really struggling with speed, I wouldn't recommend going that high. Same with rims, they're all subjective. Rim size is all subjective, and track widths is all subjective. So for drivetrain, I recommend keeping everything race. Seen a few people use sport transmissions. With how we tune, we usually just tune final drive. We don't tweak gears that much. When you're drifting, especially at these slower sections, you want to be staying in one gear. Either a sport or race transmission works fine. I prefer the race because you can tweak more of the gear ratio. But definitely keep that race off sport. Same with driveline, keep it race. Same with diff, keep it race. Gives you more options to tune. For platform and handling, I'd recommend race brakes. Again, it allows you to tweak your brake pressure and your brake balance, which is really important for staying behind someone. For springs and dampers, I definitely recommend drift suspension. Gives you more lock, allows you to kind of be more stable, be more consistent, because you're not spinning out as much. I see a lot of people use rally suspension. Well, not a lot, but a few people. This is what we used to run in FH3. They do have more wheel lock than the race springs, but it's like fractional. But I definitely recommend drift suspension if you're starting to get into it. Front anti-roll bars, I'd keep them race. Same with the rear, keep them race. A roll cage, I personally don't like running roll cages, but if you like the look of it, or if you feel like it helps with your car, like stability, then yeah, definitely pick up a roll cage. Weight reduction, you always leave this stock. You never add race weight or any kind of weight, because it makes the car feel a lot more twitchy. It's a lot more responsive, and like you have to correct a lot more when using these lighter cars. For engine, it is sort of what you're subjective to. If you like high horsepower or low horsepower, keep it like 500 minimum. If you're running about 400, you'll find that you'll grip up a lot. You'll just have a harder time hanging with people, although you might be a bit stable because you can just full throttle around the whole course. But there is ways to get around that with higher horsepower anyway. I definitely recommend a higher horsepower. For this build, we're going to be using 700 horsepower. I will leave I'll leave the tune in the description, like how to download it, if you would like this tune. Or I may even make a video on this exact tune. But you can try and copy these settings if you like, but I'm just going to rush through it. Yeah, as you can see, we have 732 horsepower, which is pretty much the perfect balance point for this car in my opinion. For flywheel, I haven't really tested too many flywheels. I've been using race for the longest time, but just recently I switched to sport, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Once you've done that, your build is pretty much complete. Once you've gone over the upgrades, got the right tires, the right weight reduction and all that, your car is pretty much done with upgrades. So now we're going to move on to the tuning. Now that we're on the tuner section, the first thing that I would recommend doing is going to anti-roll bars. There's a formula that we use for roll bars, springs and damping, and I'll get into it in a sec. But they all use the same formula to just get the car 100% balanced. So the first thing I'd actually recommend doing is backing out of the tuning section, going to custom upgrade or to my cars, whatever. You can basically pull up this menu on the left there, press up on the D-pad, or if you're looking at your car in the garage, it would be up on the right stick, and you want to be looking at the number next to front, which is basically your the balance of the car. So 5% of the weight, is going to the front of the car right now. So you want to make a mental note of that number, because we'll be using it to help with the formula in a second. So we'll back out of here, go to tuning, we'll go to anti-roll bars. Now I've left a link to this page in the description. Basically a tuning guide. Now it's very old, it's about 5 years old I believe from when this exact one was posted, and I believe it was older before that. But a lot of these tuning setups or this tuning guide still applies to Horizon 4 and it still works perfectly. So if we scroll up to anti-roll bars, there's basically this whole formula that kind of goes on, but I'll kind of try and simplify it and show it in video form to help some of you guys out. Okay, for roll bars, what you want to do is you want to put the front all the way as stiff as it can go, and you want to put the rear as soft as it can go. So the two numbers we get is 65 and 1. Now if we open up a calculator, we can do 65 minus 1, which will be 64. Now that you've got 64, you want to do times by 0.55. So that's that number that we saw earlier with the front, the 55%. You hit equals and you get 35.2. Now what you want to do is hit plus and then hit plus 1. And then we'll get 36.2, and that is going to be the anti-roll bar setting that we need. So we're going to go back into Forza, remember the number 36.2, and then we're going to pull this down till we get to 36.2. And then we do the same for the rear, but this time we times it by 0.45, as it's basically like the opposite of what our first number was, 55. So just imagine the middle point's 50. If it's 54% in the front, you'd basically minus 4 from 50, giving you 46. So that would be the second number that we're using here. So what we're going to do is we're going to clear this. We're going to do 64 times by 0.45, and that will give us this number, and then we add 1, giving us 29.8. So this is the rear anti-roll bar setting. $29.8. So now we have basically perfect anti-roll bars that are completely balanced. So now we're going to move on to springs. Basically do the same thing. You pull this slider all the way to the as stiff as it can go, and then we pull this slider all the way down as soft as it can go. So as you can see, it's 1566.2. I'm going to put that into a calculator, so 1566.2, and then you're going to get this number 313.2, and then minus it by 313.2. So this will give you this number. This is basically your base number that you're going to be timesing everything else by. So we'll do 1253 times 0.55, which will give you 698.15. Then we're going to add 100 to that, and that will give us 789.15. So once you've got that, put it into Forza, so 789. So 789.15. So obviously that would be rounded up as it's 1.5 to 0.2. With the rear, you basically do the same thing. You pull 1253 and then times it by 0.45, giving you 563.85. Add 100 to it, and this will be our rear spring setting. So 663.85. So pull that into here, 663.85. So that's as close as we can get, 0.7, so we'll leave it at that. With the ride height, I recommend doing 3 up from the front. It just makes the car feel a little bit more stable in my opinion. But if you want to full out slam your car, you're more than welcome to. It doesn't affect that much. I just find it a personal preference. For damping, we basically do the same thing. So you pull the slider up, pull the slider down. We have 20 and 3. Go to the calculator, we do 20 minus 3, which is 17. And then we do, we times this number by 0.55. So we get 9.35, and we plus 1, giving us 10.35. So this will be your front. So 10.35. Obviously you can't get 10.35, so we round it up to 10.4. And you basically do the same with the rear. So we'll take 17, and we'll times it by 0.45, giving us 7.65, and then you add 1, giving you 8.65. So this will be your rear. And again, you can't get 8.65, so you go 8.7 just to round it up. With bump stiffness, you basically take this number, and you either times it by any number between 0.5 and 0.75. I personally like doing mine 0.75, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to get 10.4, times it by 0.75, giving us 0.8, and this will be your rear, so 7.8. And then we take 8.7 and times it by 0.75. This will be your rear as well. So obviously we can't get 6.525, so we round it down to 6.5. And this is the damping complete. Now I put a wing on my car just to show this to people that put wings on their car. This is definitely something you want to do, so you have as little downforce off of the wing as possible. This will limit you when drifting and make your car feel a lot more twitchy. You basically want to put the slider all the way to speed. The more you put it to cornering, the more downforce you have. Like, this is how much pounds of downforce this is, I believe. Someone can confirm. I don't do racing. I don't really tune for aero, so I'm not too sure. You basically want to put this slider all the way to speed, and this will limit or basically minimize how much downforce you're going to have to that part of the car. We're going to move on to braking. Braking is completely preference. I definitely recommend a low brake pressure, because obviously if you're going to be braking a lot behind people and getting on their door, you definitely don't want to slam on your car and bog your car down in case you might stall or something else might happen. So I definitely recommend a low brake pressure. This is my personal settings, but again, everyone is subjective. Just try out different things and see what you like. I would recommend putting your balance at the rear though. That's something I strongly suggest. And for differential, completely lock it up, 100, 100. So now we're going to move on to alignment, gearing and tires. Tires and gearing we'll do outside, but alignment we can kind of adjust now. I recommend as a base using -5 and -2. These are the best base settings you could use in my opinion. They're very, very stable and they're easy to work with. They're very close to the number that we want to hit, so we'll get into that in a little bit. For the rear toe, again, I just put it at 0.3. It's kind of preference. Some people do like 0.7, 0.5. Same with toe. Toe kind of slows you down in transitions. It's quite difficult to sort of explain, but once you put it on, you'll definitely get a feel for how it affects the car. But I find it makes your transitions a lot slower. It can help in some circumstances, but I tend to just leave it at 0. Definitely works for pretty much every car that I've used. And with the angle caster, I leave it at 7. Some people run it at 1. I don't know if there's any in-betweens like 5, but I tend myself just to leave it at 7. It works for me. Again, I feel like this one's very personal preference and I don't know how much it affects the car. And now that we've done this, we're going to move outside and focus on the gearing and the tires. So now that we're at the crates, I'm basically going to go through some of the tuning, like the gearing and the tires. These are quite important, and basically how to adjust them properly, because I see a lot of people making their builds, they're sort of redlining a lot or they're bogging, and hopefully this sort of helps some people out with the issues they're having with gears. I threw my controller cam on screen just so you can kind of see what I'm doing, with my thumbstick, my clutch and all that. Now take in mind that I do drive with manual and clutch on, I don't use manual, and my steering is also normal, and my steering settings and all of that are on default. I get a lot of questions about what dead zones I use. They're all completely default that you get with the base game. I will just quickly run through what that looks like. Now this may look a little bit different because I'm on PC, but if we go to advanced, you can see all these dead zones and all these linearities and things like that. The only thing that I've adjusted in here is my vibration, and I've turned that off here, and that's the only thing that I've changed. I also recommend switching ANA to telemetry because this will help with tuning, and I'll get into that in a second. So now we back out, we're basically going to go through the gears. Just as an example, I'm basically going to put my gearing to about 4. This will make the gear very, very short, and you'll see in a second that I'm going to be redlining a lot. Yeah, so as you can see, my car is just bouncing off the rev limit on full throttle. Now that's the opposite of what we want. We want like a stable point where the revs are very high, but the car isn't just bouncing off the rev limiter like this. So if we go back into tuning, and we go back to gears, if we lengthen this to around 350 or 340 near where it was at the start, and we go back into this, you can see that your third gear is no longer bouncing as fast. It's still bouncing and we need to lengthen it a little bit, but as long as we're not full throttling, you can see that it no longer hits the rev limiter, and that's close to what you want. So it is just a lot of, trial and error, a lot of, tweaking to kind of get the car to where you want it to be. Now for my specific build, I run 320. I know that's what I want for this setup. Again, you just want to tweak stuff and kind of figure out where your point is that you want. So I recommend only focusing on the final drive. I do not recommend adjusting first, second, fifth and sixth. I recommend keeping them stock. Not only is this a massive time saver, but you can also scuff your gear ratio completely doing this, and it's just a lot easier focusing on one or two things rather than like the whole gear ratio and making them custom. You can if you like, but this is just what I personally do, and I think it will help a lot of people. So something I do recommend though is changing your fourth gear. This is again trial and error, you have to test it at certain areas. But I like my gear at 1.39 for this build especially, because the way that third is tuned, it works on pretty much every corner. Fourth gear is just like a little help to extend corners if I really need it. But all of your corners should pretty much all stay in one gear. Now I recommend third as being that gear just because it's one of the closest to first. Like, it's just a really good midpoint, and it's definitely one of the most popular gears that people use. So yeah, keep your gears in third if you can. Use fourth if you really want to. I would just avoid fifth, sixth, first and second as your gears. For tyres, this is the tyre setup that I run on this car. Again, it is all subjective. It is just a lot of trial and error. This is a really good base point for a lot of cars. If cars are quite heavy or quite grippy, I definitely recommend putting the tyre pressure a lot higher. But now we're going to get into the alignment of how to properly tune this. Although -5, -2 is a perfect base point, there is a way to slightly adjust it. So using that setting I was talking about earlier, I'll show it again quickly, where we go to settings, control settings, hit advanced. I don't know what it looks like on Xbox, but I'm sure it looks very similar. Then we go to switch ANA, telemetry, or TTS. So then accept it, back out of this. Now if we press down on the D-pad, we get this menu that comes up. Now if you pull up the one that I'm on, it's tires/misc, or miscellaneous. As you can see, it shows the camber. So what you want to do is like kind of drift in a circle or drift the track. It's up to you. Just make sure you know what gear you're in. I know that I'm in third right now. You might have to pull the menu down and pull it back up again to check that. So focusing on the camber, if we drift around, you can see it gets close to 0. What you basically want to do is be able to find a spot that you feel comfortable drifting at and that it stays near 0. So as you can see, we're getting quite low numbers. It's very rarely going into the positives, and that's sort of what you want to make the car stable as possible. It might take some tweaking. So if you find that the car is going into positive camber quite a lot and it's not really staying around that 0 mark, you want to add more negative camber. I recommend doing it 3 notches at a time so you don't overdo it. For this car, I did notice it was kind of dipping a lot higher on the negative scale, so we're gonna pull it down by about 3. This will bring us a lot closer to the numbers that we want to be at. So if we pull it up again, as you can see, it's staying a lot more at 0. This part is very kind of complex and very like finicky. I don't notice too much of a difference, but it is there. Like, it does make a difference somewhere or another, and it just helps get that perfect stability that you need. You're more than happy to skip that step and just stay at this -5, -2 base point, and you can even just tweak it off the way the car feels. Just don't overdo it because you might ruin the setup. Make sure you always have a restore point, or you remember where you put the camber at. You should be fine. Okay, so that's the basic build. In my opinion, it feels really solid. There might be a few things that I need to tweak. I'm yet to use this car in tandem with someone yet. I'll definitely have to try that and sort of, give it another go. But if you guys would like to see an updated version of this tune, just let me know. I'll make a drift build video on it at some point. I really hope this video helped you in some way or another, especially people that are sort of new to tuning. I hope this gives them an easier sort of guide, because they have like a genuine formula to follow rather than just basing it off someone saying this feels right and this feels wrong. If you would like to see more videos like this, just let me know in the comments below. I'll be sure to read all of them. I don't normally do talking videos, and this is my first attempt at it, so I'm sorry if it's sort of not up to standard or it's a little bit, I don't know, cringy, but I really hope this helps some of you. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. If there's anything you think that I should add, just let me know. I'll be leaving the tuning guide in the description below for you guys to check out. That is where I got a lot of this information from, at least with the formula for the springs, dampening, etc. So be sure to check that out. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you later. Peace.